A black woman stands in a dress at her husband's funeral when his rich white family suddenly drags her into the garden. In front of everyone, her mother-in-law grabs a pair of scissors and starts cutting off her hair. Half of it gone. The crowd gasps, but no one dares to help. Then screeching tires, a black limousine. The door slams, and a billionaire CEO storms toward them. "You're coming with me," he says, wrapping his coat around her as cameras flash. But this rescue isn't the end, it's the beginning. Because what starts as an act of protection turns into a firestorm of lies, revenge, and a love powerful enough to risk everything. The world thinks she's his scandal. The family swears she's a fraud. But the truth? It's deeper and far more dangerous than anyone knows. When the past won't stay buried and the world turns against her, will she find the strength to rise again? Or lose everything trying? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Atlanta sky hung heavy with clouds, casting a somber grey pall over the church grounds. Naomi Jefferson Harlow stood in the last row of the grand sanctuary, her deep red dress a stark contrast against the sea of black-clad mourners. The silk fabric, a gift from her late mother, wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, offering what little comfort it could on this devastating day. She could feel the disapproving glances, the whispered judgments. An elderly woman 2 rows ahead turned to stare, then quickly looked away when Naomi caught her eye. The red dress wasn't traditional, she knew that. But it was all she had left of her mother, and somehow wearing it made her feel less alone. The minister's voice echoed through the vast space. "We gather today to remember James Harlow, beloved son, brother, and husband." Husband. The word pierced Naomi's heart. Just 2 months ago, she'd been making dinner, waiting for James to come home. Instead, 2 police officers had appeared at her door with news of the crash. Now here she was, 28 years old and a widow, standing apart from the family she'd married into but never truly joined. From her position at the back, Naomi could see Marjorie Harlow's perfectly coiffed silver hair in the front row. Even from behind, her mother-in-law's rigid posture spoke volumes. As if sensing Naomi's gaze, Marjorie turned slightly, leaning to whisper something to the woman beside her. Both glanced back at Naomi, their expressions a mixture of disdain and pity. "Did you see what she's wearing?" The whispered words carried clearly to where Naomi stood. Red, of all colors. Such a disgrace. Naomi closed her eyes, letting the minister's words wash over her without really hearing them. She thought of James, of his kind smile, and the way he'd always stood between her and his family's subtle cruelty. He'd been her shield, her advocate, her partner. Now she stood alone, feeling every bit the outsider they'd always considered her to be. The service continued with hymns and eulogies, each speaker painting a picture of James that seemed to carefully edit out any mention of his marriage or his widow. It was as if Naomi's 5 years with him had been erased, deemed unworthy of acknowledgement in this grand narrative of the Harlow family legacy. As the final hymn faded, people began to move, gathering their things and offering condolences to the family. Naomi remained in her spot, watching as mourners filed past the front pew where the Harlows sat. She saw Marjorie accept each handshake and embrace with practiced grace, her face a mask of dignified grief. Then, unexpectedly, Marjorie made her way toward the back of the church. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she approached Naomi, her pearl necklace catching what little light filtered through the stained glass windows. "Naomi." Marjorie's voice was quiet but carried an edge of steel. "We're having a family farewell dinner at the estate. You will attend, of course." It wasn't a question. Naomi recognized the tone, the same one Marjorie had used throughout her marriage to James, making requests that were really commands, offering choices that weren't really choices at all. Naomi hesitated, her instincts screaming that this dinner would only bring more pain. But refusing would give Marjorie another reason to paint her as disrespectful, another story to whisper to her social circle about her son's inappropriate choice of wife. "James would have wanted you there," Marjorie added, wielding her dead son's memory like a weapon. "Yes, of course," Naomi finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be there." "Good." Marjorie's lips curved in what might have passed for a smile to anyone who didn't know better. "We'll expect you at 6 o'clock sharp." As Marjorie walked away, Naomi gathered her purse and coat, preparing to leave the church that had never felt welcoming, even when James was alive. Outside, the evening was settling in, the clouds growing darker with the threat of rain. The Harlow mansion waited across town, its columned facade and manicured grounds a symbol of old money and older prejudices. Naomi walked to her car, her red dress catching the wind and fluttering like a flag of defiance against the gathering gloom. She knew trouble waited for her at that dinner, could feel it in her bones as surely as she could feel a storm approaching. The drive to the Harlow estate felt both too long and too short. Each mile brought her closer to what she suspected would be another orchestrated attempt to make her feel small, to remind her that she'd never truly belonged in their world. The grand gates of the estate loomed before her, and as she drove through them, her red dress seemed to glow even brighter against the deepening grey of the evening sky. Naomi parked her modest car among the luxury vehicles that lined the circular driveway. The mansion rose before her, its windows already lit against the approaching darkness. She sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, gathering the strength she'd need to face whatever waited inside. Finally, she stepped out, straightened her dress, and began walking toward the front door, her mother's red dress moving with each step like a silent prayer for courage. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she approached the massive wooden doors. Behind her, the sky continued to darken, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, nature itself seeming to acknowledge the storm that was gathering, not just in the clouds above, but in the hearts and minds of those waiting inside the Harlow mansion. The Harlow mansion's garden was a vision of old southern grandeur. White linen tablecloths fluttered in the evening breeze, laden with crystal champagne flutes that caught the light from paper lanterns strung overhead. White lilies, James's favorite flowers, adorned every surface, their heavy perfume hanging in the humid air. Naomi's heels sank slightly into the manicured lawn as she made her way through the gathering. Conversations hushed as she passed, replaced by whispers that followed in her wake. She recognized faces from country club gatherings and charity galas, people who had smiled politely at her when James was alive, but never truly accepted her presence in their world. "Would you care for some champagne, dear?" A server approached, but before Naomi could respond, Marjorie materialized beside her, dressed in expensive black silk that rustled with her every movement. "I think we need to discuss something more important than refreshments." Marjorie's voice carried across the garden, drawing attention. "The matter of the Harlow family heirlooms." Naomi's throat tightened. "I'm not sure what you mean, Marjorie." "Don't play innocent." Marjorie's eyes narrowed. "The jewelry, the silver, the artwork, everything that rightfully belongs to this family. Items that James, in his unfortunate confusion, allowed you access to." The gathered guests shifted closer, like vultures sensing a kill. Naomi stood straighter, drawing strength from the memory of her mother's words. "Your dignity is not for sale." "Those items were gifts, Marjorie, from my husband to his wife." Naomi kept her voice steady, I won't return gifts given in love. Love. Marjorie's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Is that what you call it? We all know what you really wanted. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You saw a wealthy white man you could manipulate. You saw dollar signs, not love. The accusation hit Naomi like a physical blow. Memories of quiet mornings with James, of shared dreams and gentle touches threatened to shatter under the weight of Marjorie's cruel words. That's not true, Naomi managed, but Marjorie was already moving, her hand reaching for something on the flower arrangement table. The flash of silver was Naomi's only warning. Before she could react, Marjorie's fingers were in her hair, and the cold bite of scissors pressed against her scalp. The first cut made a horrible scratching sound, and a chunk of Naomi's dark curls fell to the pristine grass. You'll never belong here, Marjorie snarled, making another cut. Never be one of us. Snip. Never be good enough. Snip. Naomi stood frozen, shock rendering her immobile as more of her hair fell around her feet. The garden had gone deadly quiet except for Marjorie's ragged breathing and the terrible sound of the scissors. Through tear-blurred eyes, Naomi saw the other guests looking away, finding sudden interest in their champagne glasses or the flower arrangements. Not one person moved to help. Half of Naomi's head was brutally shorn, the remaining hair jagged and uneven, when the screech of tires pierced the terrible silence. A sleek black limousine came to an abrupt stop outside the garden gates. The door flew open before the vehicle had fully stopped. Grant Weston emerged like an avenging angel, his tall frame radiating fury as he strode across the lawn. Naomi had met him only a few times at corporate events, but she'd never seen him like this. His usually composed face was dark with rage, his movements sharp and purposeful. Get away from her! His voice boomed across the garden, causing Marjorie to stumble backward, the scissors falling from her hand. Camera flashes began popping, some guests unable to resist capturing the dramatic scene on their phones. Grant ignored them all, shrugging off his expensive suit coat as he reached Naomi. With gentle hands that contrasted sharply with his thunderous expression, he wrapped the coat around her shoulders. You're coming with me. His words were quiet, but brooked no argument. One hand came to rest protectively on her back as he turned her toward the gate. This is a private family matter, Marjorie called after them, her voice shrill. You have no right to interfere. Grant stopped and turned, his expression so fierce that Marjorie actually took a step backward. Family. His voice dripped with contempt. I've seen wild animals show more humanity than you just displayed. He looked at the gathered guests, his disgust evident. And you're all complicit. Every single one of you who stood by and watched this happen. More camera flashes lit up the darkening garden as Grant guided Naomi to his waiting car. The driver held the door open, and Grant helped her inside before sliding in next to her. As the car pulled away from the curb, Naomi's trembling hands clutched his coat closer around her shoulders. The familiar scent of his cologne, something expensive and subtle, filled her senses as shock began to give way to the full horror of what had just happened. Her fingers found their way to her ravaged hair, and a small sob escaped her throat. Grant reached across the seat and gently took her hand, pulling it away from her head and holding it firmly in his own. Don't, he said softly. Don't touch it. We'll fix everything. He squeezed her hand once before letting go to pull out his phone. Thompson, get me the number for Alessandra's salon. Yes, the one that stays open late for celebrities. Tell her it's an emergency, and I'll pay whatever she asks. The limousine glided through the darkening streets of Atlanta, putting distance between Naomi and the nightmare she'd just lived through. Through the tinted windows, she watched the familiar landmarks of her married life fade away, while her reflection, with its brutally half-shorn head, stared back at her like a stranger's. Grant's coat was warm around her shoulders, but she couldn't stop shaking. The evening's events played on repeat in her mind. The glint of scissors, the horrible sound of cutting, the way everyone had just watched. Her mother's red dress, which had felt like armor just hours ago, now felt like evidence of a crime. Proof that she had dared to stand out, to claim space in a world that didn't want her. The car continued its journey into the night, carrying her away from everything she'd known, toward an uncertain future that somehow felt safer than the past she was leaving behind. The limousine glided through the night, carrying them north toward Manhattan. In the spacious back seat, Naomi's quiet sobs were the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Her shoulders shook with each breath, though she tried to muffle the sound behind her hands. Grant kept glancing at her in the rear-view mirror, his jaw clenched so tight it must have hurt. The streetlights cast alternating patterns of light and shadow across his face, highlighting the tension in his features. Every few minutes his eyes would meet hers in the mirror, filled with a mixture of concern and barely contained anger. The sky gradually shifted from black to deep purple as they approached the city. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan when the car finally pulled up to a towering glass building in the heart of the financial district. Grant helped Naomi out of the car, keeping his coat wrapped protectively around her shoulders as he guided her through the lobby. The night security guard nodded respectfully, but couldn't hide his curious glance at Naomi's partially visible ravaged hair. The private elevator whisked them to the penthouse floor. Grant used his keycard and led her into a vast, open-concept living space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the awakening city. The morning light painted everything in soft gold tones, but Naomi kept her eyes downcast, avoiding any reflective surfaces. "You can stay here as long as you need," Grant said quietly, gesturing to the space, "until you decide what you want to do next." His voice was gentle, almost careful, as if he was speaking to a wounded animal. "Thank you," Naomi whispered, her voice raw from crying. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, still clutching his coat around her like armor. Grant watched her for a moment, then walked to a sleek wooden cabinet near the master bedroom. He opened it and pulled out a beautiful silk scarf in shades of blue and gold. His fingers traced the delicate fabric before he turned back to Naomi. "This was Rebecca's," he said softly, referring to his late wife. "She would have wanted you to have it." He held out the scarf. "You can use it to cover your head if you'd like." Naomi took the scarf with trembling fingers, the silk smooth and cool against her skin. "I couldn't possibly—" "You don't owe them your tears," Grant interrupted firmly. "Not a single one." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. He showed her to the guest room, a spacious suite with its own bathroom and the same stunning views of the city. "Make yourself at home. There are clean towels in the bathroom, and I'll have some clothes sent up later today." Left alone, Naomi finally allowed herself to look around the room. The bed was made up with crisp white linens, and a plush chair sat near the window. Everything spoke of quiet luxury, but she felt out of place, like a broken thing in a perfect setting. She decided to shower, hoping the hot water might wash away some of the horror of the previous night. But as she stepped into the marble bathroom, she caught sight of her reflection in the full-length mirror and froze. The damage was even worse than she'd imagined. One side of her head was brutally chopped, while the other still held her natural curls. The contrast was stark and cruel, a physical manifestation of how thoroughly she'd been violated. Naomi's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, great heaving sobs racking her body. She cried for her lost dignity, for the public humiliation, for the death of her husband, and for the life she'd thought she'd have. The sound of her grief echoed off the bathroom tiles, but she couldn't stop. She didn't hear Grant's soft footsteps in the hallway, didn't notice him pause outside her door at the sound of her crying. After a moment, he moved away, and when she finally emerged from the bathroom an hour later, wrapped in a fluffy robe with Rebecca's scarf covering her head, she found a breakfast tray waiting outside her door. The tray held coffee, fresh fruit, and warm croissants, along with a note in Grant's precise handwriting. "Take all the time you need. I'm here if you want to talk." The day passed in a haze. Naomi drifted between sleeping and staring out at the city below, watching the sun arc across the sky. Grant respected her space, though she occasionally heard him moving about the penthouse, taking calls in his home office or speaking quietly to his staff. As evening settled over Manhattan, the city began to sparkle with thousands of lights. Naomi finally ventured out of the guest room, drawn to the view. She found Grant standing at the window in the living room, his reflection ghosted against the darkness beyond. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question had been burning in her mind all day. Grant turned to face her, his expression somber. "Because no one else did," he said simply. The words carried the weight of understanding, of knowing what it meant to stand alone in a moment of crisis. Exhaustion finally overtook Naomi, and she settled onto the plush leather couch, still wearing Grant's coat over her shoulders and Rebecca's scarf around her head. The city lights twinkled below like earthbound stars, and the events of the past 24 hours began to feel almost dreamlike. Her eyes grew heavy as she watched the night city, and she felt herself drifting off. The last thing she remembered was the soft sound of Grant's footsteps retreating, giving her space to rest, to heal, to begin finding her way back to herself in the safety of this unexpected sanctuary. The silk scarf was smooth against her cheek, and Grant's coat still carried his subtle cologne, reminders that in her darkest moment, when everyone else had turned away, someone had chosen to stand beside her. As sleep finally claimed her, Naomi's tears had dried, leaving behind a fragile peace in their wake. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, gently rousing Naomi from her dreamless sleep. For a moment she felt disoriented, the unfamiliar softness of the couch beneath her, and the weight of Grant's coat still draped over her shoulders. Then reality crashed back. The funeral, Marjorie's attack, Grant's rescue. She sat up slowly, adjusting Rebecca's silk scarf that had slipped slightly during the night. The peaceful morning shattered as Elena Vasquez, Grant's chief assistant, burst through the front door. Her heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor as she approached, tablet in hand and concern etched across her face. "Mr. Weston, we have a situation?" Elena called out, before noticing Naomi on the couch. Her expression softened immediately. "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Jefferson Harlow. I'm Elena Vasquez." Grant emerged from his home office, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit. "What's happening, Elena?" Elena held up her tablet, showing them a news website. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. There, splashed across the screen, was a photo of her from yesterday, Grant's coat around her shoulders, her partially shaved head visible, being led away from the Harlow estate. "It's everywhere," Elena explained, her voice gentle but urgent. "Someone at the funeral posted the video of the incident. It went viral overnight. Every major news outlet has picked it up, and social media is exploding." Naomi's hands began to shake as Elena swiped through different posts. The headline screamed at her: "Widow humiliated at husband's funeral. Racial tensions erupt at Atlanta Society gathering. Tech billionaire Grant Weston intervenes in society scandal." "There are reporters camped outside the building," Elena continued. "They're demanding statements from both of you." Panic seized Naomi's chest. The room seemed to shrink around her, and she struggled to draw breath. "I can't. I can't face them. I can't have everyone seeing me like this." Grant moved swiftly to her side, his presence steady and calming. "You don't have to face anyone, Naomi. Eleanor, implement Privacy Protocol Alpha. Full media blackout." Elena nodded, already typing on her phone. "Security is maintaining the perimeter. No one gets in or out without clearance. I've already contacted our PR team to prepare statements." "No statements," Grant said firmly. "Not yet. Give Naomi time to process this." Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to bring this chaos into your life." Grant's expression softened as he sat beside her. "This isn't your fault. The only person who should be sorry is Marjorie Harlow." Elena's tablet pinged with new notifications. "The public is overwhelmingly on your side, Mrs. Jefferson Harlow. The video has sparked a huge conversation about racism and abuse in elite circles. People are sharing their own stories of discrimination." Naomi looked up, surprised. "They are." Elena showed her some of the supportive messages flooding social media. "You've become a symbol of dignity in the face of cruelty. People are inspired by your strength." "Strength?" Naomi's laugh was bitter. "I just stood there. I didn't do anything." "Sometimes survival is strength," Grant said quietly. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the media circus below. After a moment, he turned back to face them. "Naomi, I have a proposition for you." She looked at him questioningly. "The Western Women's Foundation helps women overcome abuse, discrimination, and poverty. We provide support, resources, and opportunities for them to rebuild their lives." He paused, studying her face. "We need someone to head up our new outreach program. Someone who understands firsthand what these women are going through." Naomi blinked, stunned. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to turn this pain into purpose," Grant replied. "You have a unique perspective and natural empathy. These women need someone like you." Elena smiled encouragingly. "The foundation has been looking for the right person for months. This could be perfect timing." Naomi stood and walked to the window, watching the reporters milling around below. Her mother's words came back to her. "God doesn't waste pain, baby. He uses it to help others heal." I need time to think about it," she said finally. "Of course." Grant nodded. "Take all the time you need. Elena will handle the press, and you're welcome to stay here as long as necessary." After lunch, which Elena had ordered from a nearby cafe, Naomi found herself alone in the guest room. She spotted a leather-bound journal on the bedside table, likely left by Elena. Opening it to the first blank page, she picked up a pen and began to write. "Dear Mama, today I choose to live. Today I choose to believe that what happened to me isn't the end of my story, but perhaps the beginning of something new. You always said dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. I won't surrender mine to hate or fear. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know this. I will not be defined by that moment in the garden. I will not let Marjorie's cruelty become my identity. Instead, I'll use this pain to help others find their way back to light, just like you taught me. I miss you, Mama, but I feel you with me, wrapping me in love like that red dress you gave me. And I promise you, I'm going to be okay." Naomi closed the journal, pressing it to her heart. Outside, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of hope. Monday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Western Foundation's headquarters. Naomi adjusted the silk scarf covering her still uneven hair, her fingers trembling slightly as she followed Grant through the sleek hallways. "The team is excited to meet you," Grant said, his voice warm and reassuring. But Naomi caught the sideways glances from employees as they passed. She recognized that look, the same one she'd received at country club gatherings with the Harlows, the look that said, "You don't belong here." The conference room buzzed with quiet conversation as they entered. 12 staff members sat around a polished oak table, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Naomi's heart pounded, but she remembered her mother's words about holding her head high. Grant cleared his throat. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Naomi Jefferson Harlow. She'll be heading our new outreach program." A woman with steel grey hair and sharp features spoke first. "Mrs. Jefferson Harlow, I'm Barbara Mitchell, Program Director. We've all seen the incident. While we sympathize with your situation, running an outreach program requires extensive experience." Naomi felt her chest tighten, but instead of shrinking away, she smiled gently. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Mitchell. I don't have the kind of experience you might expect. What I do have is first-hand understanding of what it means to feel powerless, to have your dignity stripped away in public. But I also know what it means to be offered help when you need it most." She paused, meeting each person's eyes. "I'm not here to replace anyone's expertise. I'm here to learn from you, to work alongside you, and to help create a space where women can find not just resources but real understanding." The room fell silent. Barbara's expression softened slightly. A younger woman with bright eyes spoke up. "I'm Sarah Chen, Communications Director. I think having someone who's actually been through trauma leading outreach could be exactly what we need. Theory and practice are different things." Throughout the morning, Naomi listened, more than she spoke. She took notes, asked questions, and shared small moments of connection with her new colleagues. By lunchtime, the initial frost had begun to thaw. During the afternoon briefing, Naomi suggested incorporating peer support groups alongside professional services. "Sometimes," she explained, "what women need most is to know they're not alone." Barbara nodded approvingly. "That's actually a very good point. We could pilot a program." The day passed in a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and training sessions. As evening approached, Naomi gathered her things, feeling cautiously optimistic. She'd made it through her first day, and while not everyone was convinced, she'd at least earned the chance to prove herself. The lobby was quiet as she headed toward the exit. Outside, the street lamps were just flickering to life against the darkening sky. She pushed through the revolving door, inhaling the crisp evening air. "Mrs. Jefferson Harlow." A harsh flash blinded her. "How does it feel to be a charity case? Did you marry into the Harlow family for money? What do you say to rumors that—" The questions hit like physical blows. Naomi stumbled backward, her purse slipping from her shoulder. More flashes, more shouted questions. The world started spinning. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Back off! Now!" Grant appeared beside her, his tall frame blocking the photographers. He wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders, guiding her back inside. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're safe." In his private office, Naomi sank into a leather chair, trembling. Grant handed her a glass of water, then sat across from her, his face etched with concern and something deeper, pain. "I should have warned you about the tabloids," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Naomi took a shaky sip. "Not your fault, I just froze. All I could think about was that night in the garden." "I know." Grant's voice was heavy with understanding. He was silent for a long moment, then spoke again. "I lost my wife, Claire, 3 years ago. Depression. He swallowed hard. She couldn't take the pressure anymore. The constant scrutiny, the cruel headlines, the whispers. I found her in our bathroom. I couldn't save her." Naomi's heart ached at the raw grief in his voice. "When I saw what Marjorie did to you," he continued, "when I saw that same look of despair in your eyes, I couldn't stand by and watch another woman be broken by cruelty, Not again." "Thank you," Naomi whispered, "for everything." She hesitated, then added, I haven't prayed since James died. I used to pray every day, but now I don't know if I can anymore." Grant's eyes softened with understanding. Sometimes faith is just a whisper when it used to be a song. That's okay. Try again, even if it feels small. God doesn't measure faith by volume. Later that night, in the quiet of her room, Naomi knelt by the window. The city lights sparkled below, like earthbound stars. Her mother's Bible lay open beside her, its familiar pages offering silent comfort. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "if you see me, please help me believe again." As if in answer, rain began to fall, gentle drops pattering against the glass. Each drop seemed to whisper of cleansing, of renewal, of hope being born again in the quiet hours of night. Dawn painted Manhattan's skyline in soft gold as Naomi hurried through the lobby of the Western Foundation building. It was only 6:30 in the morning, but she wanted to prove her dedication. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she made her way to the elevator, clutching a folder full of ideas she'd worked on through the night. The office was peacefully quiet this early. Naomi settled at her desk, spreading out her notes about the upcoming charity gala. The event would support women rebuilding their lives after domestic abuse, a cause that resonated deeply with her own experiences. Sarah Chen arrived an hour later, coffee in hand, and did a double take. "You're here early?" "Couldn't sleep," Naomi admitted with a small smile. "I've been thinking about the gala. What if we incorporated survivor stories into the program? Not just statistics, but real voices." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That could be powerful. We have a major donor coming in today. Margaret Lancaster. She's considering a significant contribution, but she's bringing her teenage daughter, Emily. The girl's been struggling lately." They spent the morning preparing presentation materials. Around 10 o'clock, the Lancasters arrived. Margaret was elegant and poised, but her daughter Emily hung back, shoulders hunched, dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. As Sarah led Margaret through a tour of the foundation, Naomi noticed Emily drifting toward the break room. Following her instincts, she approached the girl. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" Naomi asked softly. "We have the good kind, with mini marshmallows." Emily looked up, startled, then gave a tiny nod. While preparing their drinks, Naomi felt someone watching. Through the glass walls, she caught a glimpse of Grant observing from the hallway, his expression thoughtful. "Your mum seems really interested in our work," Naomi said, sliding Emily's mug across the table. "Yeah." Emily's voice was barely audible. She wants to help people, after what happened with Dad." Understanding dawned in Naomi's heart. She didn't press for details, instead sharing, "You know, when I was going through a hard time, someone told me that healing isn't linear. Some days are harder than others, and that's okay." Emily's eyes welled with tears. "Does it ever get better?" "It does," Naomi assured her, reaching across to squeeze the girl's hand. "Not all at once, but bit by bit. Like sunrise. You don't notice it happening until suddenly there's light." They talked quietly until Margaret and Sarah returned. Emily hugged Naomi goodbye, whispering, "Thank you." Margaret announced a $1 million donation on the spot. After they left, Grant appeared at Naomi's desk. "Coffee?" "I'd love some," she replied, surprised but pleased. They walked to a small cafe around the corner, finding a quiet corner booth. Grant ordered their drinks. She noticed he remembered her preference for vanilla lattes. "You were remarkable with Emily," he said once they were settled. "How did you know what she needed?" Naomi wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I recognized that look in her eyes. It's the same one I see in the mirror sometimes, like you're carrying a weight no one else can see. Grant nodded slowly. Claire was like that, good at seeing people's pain. She would have loved what you're doing with the foundation. Tell me about her, Naomi asked gently. Grant's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. She was luminous, always trying to help others, even when she was struggling herself. We met in college. She was studying social work. I was already starting my first company. She believed in me before anyone else did. She sounds wonderful. She was. Grant's voice softened. But she took everyone's burdens on herself. The pressure of being in the spotlight, the expectations, it became too much. I kept telling her to rest, to let others help, but she couldn't stop trying to fix everything. Naomi finished quietly. James was similar, always trying to prove himself to his family, to be the perfect son they wanted. In the end, I think that's what led to the accident. He was exhausted, distracted. They sat in understanding silence for a moment, the afternoon sun streaming through the cafe windows. It's strange, Naomi mused, how grief can make you feel so alone, yet it's one of the most universal experiences. That's why what you're doing matters, Grant replied. You're showing people they're not alone, like you did with Emily today. They talked for another hour, sharing memories of their loved ones, finding unexpected moments of laughter among the tears. It felt natural, this connection built on shared understanding rather than pity. The walk back to the penthouse that evening was peaceful. Naomi felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her story had lifted some of the weight from her shoulders. But when she reached her door, something caught her eye. A white envelope on the floor. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper with words cut from magazines. Go back where you belong. Her hands trembled as she read it. The peace of the afternoon shattered, replaced by a familiar fear. She wanted to tell Grant, but the thought of burdening him with more problems made her hesitate. He'd already done so much. Instead, she closed the door quietly and reached for the cross necklace her mother had given her years ago. The silver was warm against her skin as she clutched it, a tangible reminder of faith. Kneeling beside her bed, Naomi closed her eyes. Lord, she whispered, I'm scared, but you've brought me this far. Please give me strength for whatever comes next. The city lights twinkled outside her window as she prepared for bed, the threatening letter hidden away in her drawer. She wouldn't let fear define her, not again. Tomorrow was another day to prove she belonged exactly where she was. The days blended together in a rhythm of purpose and healing. Naomi threw herself into her work at the foundation, finding strength in helping others who carried similar wounds. Each morning, she arrived early, reviewing cases and planning outreach programs with an enthusiasm that impressed even the most seasoned staff members. One Wednesday afternoon, during a support group session, a young woman named Teresa broke down while sharing her story. Without hesitation, Naomi crossed the room and embraced her, whispering words of encouragement that came straight from her heart. You're not alone anymore, Naomi said softly, holding Teresa as she sobbed. We're here with you, every step of the way. Unknown to them, another survivor had captured the moment on her phone. By that evening, the video had spread across social media, touching hearts nationwide. The caption read, "This is what real compassion looks like. The woman hugging her knows exactly how it feels. Western Foundation, High Hag Hope Heals." The foundation's phones started ringing non-stop. Donations poured in, from small individual contributions to major corporate pledges. Elena, Grant's assistant, could barely keep up with the influx of support. It's extraordinary, Elena told Naomi the next morning, showing her the statistics. We've received more donations in 24 hours than we usually get in 3 months. Naomi blushed, uncomfortable with the attention. "I was just doing what anyone would do." "But that's just it," Elena replied with a warm smile. "Not everyone would. That's why it matters so much." The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Naomi sat quietly in the back, taking notes as various department heads presented their reports. When Grant stood to give his closing remarks, his eyes found hers across the conference room. "I'd like to highlight something remarkable," he began, his deep voice carrying authority and warmth. "In the past week alone, our foundation has seen unprecedented growth in both reach and impact. This is largely due to the authentic compassion and dedication of our newest team member, Naomi Jefferson Harlow." The board members turned to look at her, their expressions notably different from the skepticism they'd shown when she first started. Grant continued, "Her ability to connect with our clients and inspire public support has transformed our mission from an institutional effort into a movement of genuine healing." After the meeting, several board members approached Naomi to shake her hand and express their appreciation. Mrs. Chen, one of the most influential members, pulled her aside. "My dear," she said, patting Naomi's arm, "you've brought something special to this foundation, something we didn't even know we were missing." As the boardroom emptied, Grant approached Naomi. "Have dinner with me tonight?" he asked, his voice casual but his eyes hopeful. "There's a quiet Italian place around the corner, best pasta in Manhattan." Naomi felt her heart skip a beat. "I'd like that," she replied. The restaurant was indeed quiet, tucked away on a side street with warm lighting and the smell of fresh bread in the air. Their table sat near a window, candlelight dancing between them as they settled in. "I haven't been here since—" Grant paused, then smiled slightly. "Well, it's been a while." "It's beautiful," Naomi said, taking in the intimate atmosphere. They ordered wine and antipasto, and somehow the conversation flowed easier than ever before. Grant told her about growing up in a small town in Ohio, working 3 jobs to put himself through college. "My mum used to say, 'Empty pockets don't mean an empty heart,'" he shared, chuckling at the memory. Naomi's eyes lit up. "My mother had sayings like that too. Whenever I was worried about not having the right clothes or shoes, she'd say, 'Baby girl, you're wearing dignity. That's the finest outfit there is.'" Their laughter mingled with the soft music playing in the background. Grant leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Tell me more about her." "She was—" Naomi's voice softened with love and memory. "She was everything. Raised me by herself, worked 2 nursing jobs, but somehow never missed a school event. She taught me that faith isn't just about going to church, it's about living with grace, especially when life gets hard." "She sounds remarkable," Grant said. "Like mother, like daughter." Naomi blushed, twirling pasta on her fork. "I always wanted to make her proud. Before she passed, I told her about my dream of opening a women's shelter. She loved the idea so much, she gave me her savings, just $2,000, but it meant everything to her." "What would you have called it?" "Miriam House," Naomi replied, her eyes growing distant. "After her. She always said that just as Miriam in the Bible watched over Moses in his basket, sometimes all people need is someone to watch over them until they find their strength." Grant set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "You know, with the Foundation's resources and your vision, we could make that happen." Naomi's eyes widened. "What?" "Miriam House," he said firmly. "Not someday. Soon. The Foundation has been looking to expand into residential programs. Your mother's dream could help countless women find their way home." Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes. "You'd really help me do that?" "Naomi," Grant said softly, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "You've already proven what you can do. Let me help you build something lasting." The warmth of his hand sent a gentle current through her body. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the possibility of something beautiful growing between them. After dinner, they decided to walk back rather than take the car. The night was crisp, and as they turned onto Fifth Avenue, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall. Naomi tilted her face up to the sky, letting the cool flakes kiss her cheeks. Grant watched her, a tender smile playing at his lips. "What?" she asked, catching his gaze. "You look happy," he said simply. "I am," she replied, and realized it was true. Not the fragile happiness she'd known before, but something deeper, more authentic. They walked slowly, neither rushing to end the evening. The snow fell more steadily now, dusting their coats with white. Their shoulders brushed occasionally, and each time Naomi felt that same gentle current of warmth. The city lights sparkled through the falling snow, turning Manhattan into something magical. In that moment, walking beside Grant, Naomi felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't dared to hope for, a future bright with possibility, and a friendship deepening into something she wasn't quite ready to name, but could feel in every beat of her heart. A week had passed since their dinner, and the Western Foundation's annual Winter Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Great Hall into a sparkling wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble columns, while elaborate ice sculptures caught and reflected the glow like frozen stars. Naomi stood in front of her bathroom mirror, heart racing. For the first time since that terrible day at the funeral, she wasn't wearing a scarf or hat to cover her head. Her natural hair, though still growing out unevenly from Marjorie's assault, had been styled into an elegant shape by Elena's recommended stylist. The shortcut emphasized her high cheekbones and brought attention to her eyes. "You've got this," she whispered to her reflection, touching the delicate diamond earrings Grant had sent over as a surprise. The note had read simply, "For tonight. No returning these. G." Her black gown, a masterpiece of simplicity, hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. The design featured an elegant high neck and long sleeves, yet left her shoulders bare through artful cutouts. She felt both protected and beautiful in it. A gentle knock at her door made her jump. "The car's here, Ms. Jefferson Harlow," Elena called out. The drive to the museum seemed to take both forever and no time at all. Naomi's hands fidgeted with her small clutch, where she'd tucked her mother's worn prayer card for courage. When they pulled up to the museum's entrance, cameras flashed immediately. The viral video had made her recognizable, but tonight felt different. She wasn't a victim being rescued, but a woman stepping into her power. She took a deep breath and emerged from the car, head high. The photographers called her name, but their tone was respectful, almost admiring. She heard whispers of approval about her dress, her grace, her courage in showing her natural hair. "Miss Jefferson Harlow, you look stunning! Naomi, over here, please! Beautiful dress." She offered a small smile and made her way up the steps. At the top, Grant waited, looking devastating in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, and something in his expression made her cheeks warm. "You're breathtaking," he said softly, offering his arm. "Thank you," she replied, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. "For everything." Inside, the gala was in full swing. 300 of New York's wealthiest and most influential people mingled among the art and architecture, their jewelry catching the light like constellation points. But unlike the cold judgment of the Harlow world, this crowd welcomed Naomi with genuine warmth. Women she'd helped through the foundation came up to hug her. Board members introduced her to potential donors with pride. Even those who'd initially been skeptical of her role now treated her as an integral part of the organization. Your work with the Domestic Violence Survivors Program has been extraordinary, the Foundation's head of operations told her. Applications for assistance have doubled since your video went viral. The women do all the hard work, Naomi replied. I just listen. Don't underestimate the power of being truly heard, Grant said, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Naomi. Sometimes that's the first step toward healing. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling it was time for the evening's speeches. Grant squeezed Naomi's hand before making his way to the podium. The crowd fell silent as he began to speak about the Foundation's mission and achievements. But tonight, he said, his voice taking on a more personal tone, I want to talk about what true wealth means. This past year has taught me that it isn't measured in dollars or stock prices. His eyes found Naomi in the crowd. Sometimes it takes someone special to remind us that compassion is the highest form of wealth we can possess. Naomi felt tears threatening as Grant continued. Naomi Jefferson Harlow came to our foundation during a dark time. She could have chosen bitterness. Instead, she chose to help others find their light. Her strength, her grace, and her boundless compassion have not only transformed our programs, they've transformed how we see our mission. The crowd burst into applause. Naomi felt the warmth of hundreds of supportive smiles. This wasn't the cold tolerance of the Harlow world. This was genuine appreciation for who she was and what she'd accomplished. As the formal program ended and the band began to play, donors lined up to speak with her. Many were survivors themselves, sharing their stories in quiet voices. Others wanted to support her vision for Miriam House, which Grant had announced would break ground in the spring. May I steal you away for a moment? Grant's voice cut through the crowd. He held out his hand, and Naomi took it gratefully. He led her out onto a small balcony overlooking the city. The winter air was crisp but not bitter, and strings of white lights twinkled overhead like earthbound stars. I needed some air, Naomi admitted, letting out a long breath. Too overwhelming? No, just full. My heart feels so full. She turned to face him. Thank you for what you said in there, about compassion being wealth. Grant reached out and gently touched her cheek. You're beautiful just as you are, Naomi. Not despite what happened to you, but because of how you've risen above it. Naomi felt herself blush, the warmth of his touch spreading through her entire body. Inside, the band began playing a slow song, the melody drifting out to their private sanctuary. Dance with me? Grant asked softly. She nodded, stepping into his arms. They swayed together under the winter lights, her head resting perfectly against his shoulder. Through the glass doors, camera flashes occasionally lit up the night, capturing their intimate moment. But Naomi barely noticed the photographers. All she could focus on was the steady beat of Grant's heart against her cheek, the strength of his arms around her, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the tops of Manhattan's tallest buildings when Naomi's phone began buzzing with notifications. She'd fallen asleep on the couch in her office at the foundation, exhausted from the previous night's gala, but happy. That happiness shattered as she picked up her phone. Billionaire CEO falls for his widow employee, screamed the headline from the New York Daily News. Below it was the photo of her and Grant dancing on the balcony, his hand tenderly cupping her face. The intimacy of that private moment had been twisted into something tawdry and cheap. Her hands shaking, Naomi scrolled through article after article. Scandal at Western Foundation. CEO's inappropriate relationship with employee. From viral victim to gold digger, the Naomi Jefferson Harlow story. Sources question circumstances of Harlow death. The last headline made her stomach lurch. Clicking through, she found Marjorie Harlow quoted extensively, along with what appeared to be financial documents suggesting irregularities in her husband's estate, planning just weeks before his death. These records raised disturbing questions. Marjorie told reporters, "My son changed his will dramatically in favor of this woman he'd only known for 18 months. Now she's ensnared another wealthy man. The pattern is clear to anyone willing to see it." The documents were forgeries. They had to be. Naomi had never even seen her husband's will, let alone influenced it. But the seed of doubt had been planted in the public's mind. Her office door flew open. Elena, Grant's assistant, rushed in looking frantic. "Naomi, turn on the news, now!" The morning shows were having a field day. Financial analysts questioned Grant's judgment. Social commentators debated the appropriateness of their relationship. Worst of all were the thinly veiled racist undertones in every discussion of her motives. The board's called an emergency meeting, Elena said quietly. They're demanding Grant step down temporarily until this blows over. No, Naomi whispered. They can't do that. This is his company, his foundation. Public companies care about stock prices. We're down 12% already this morning. Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Grant. "Stay in your office. I'm coming to get you." But before he could arrive, the protests started. What began as a few angry people with signs quickly swelled into a mob. They carried placards with cruel slogans and chanted, "Gold digger, go home!" Through her office window, Naomi watched in horror as someone spray-painted a racial slur across the foundation's front doors. Security guards tried to control the crowd, but the hatred was overwhelming. Grant burst into her office, his face tight with controlled fury. "The board meeting's in an hour. I need you to know that whatever happens, I don't regret a single thing I've done to help you." "This is all my fault," Naomi said, her voice breaking. "Everything I touch turns to poison. The Harlows, and now your company." "Stop," Grant said firmly. "This is Marjorie's doing, not yours. We'll fight this together." But Naomi couldn't bear to see another person's life destroyed because of her. While Grant was speaking with security about safely evacuating the building, she slipped out through the back service entrance. The alley was dark and wet from morning rain. She could hear the protesters around the corner, their angry voices echoing off the buildings. Clutching her purse to her chest, Naomi ran. "Naomi!" Grant's voice carried over the crowd. "Naomi, wait!" But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Tears blurred her vision as she pushed through groups of morning commuters, not caring where she was going as long as it was away. Away from the cameras, away from the hatred, away from Grant, whose kindness had cost him everything. She heard him calling her name, heard his footsteps behind her, but the crowd was thick with rush-hour foot traffic. Naomi ducked into a subway entrance, letting the river of people carry her down the stairs and onto a waiting train. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of Grant on the platform, scanning faces desperately. Then the train lurched forward, carrying her into the darkness of the tunnel, leaving behind the man who had risked everything to help her. The last thing she saw through her tears was his anguished expression as he watched her disappear into the crowd. Inside the moving train, Naomi huddled in a corner seat, her body shaking with silent sobs. Other passengers stared at their phones, many, reading the very articles that had destroyed her world. She watched as one woman nudged her seatmate and pointed to Naomi's photo on her screen, then quickly looked away when Naomi caught her eye. The train rattled through the darkness beneath the city, each station's fluorescent lights briefly illuminating the tears on Naomi's face. She had no destination in mind, no plan beyond escape. All she knew was that she couldn't bear to be the reason for Grant's downfall. Her phone buzzed constantly. Calls from Grant, from Elena, from Foundation staff members. She turned it off, unable to face their concern or disappointment. the weight of everything. The headlines, the protesters, the hatred in those spray-painted letters, pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. At some point, she switched trains, then switched again, letting the subway system carry her in random patterns beneath the city she'd come to love. But even here, she couldn't escape. Every newspaper stand showed her face. Every phone screen seemed to display those damning headlines. The morning rush-hour crowd thinned out, replaced by the quieter mix of tourists and off-hour workers. Still, Naomi rode, her mind replaying the previous night's happiness in cruel contrast to this morning's devastation. How had something so pure, Grant's kindness, their growing connection, been twisted into something so ugly? She thought of him facing the board alone, fighting for his company, his reputation in tatters because he'd dared to help her. The image was unbearable. First her husband, then Grant. She seemed destined to bring pain to anyone who cared about her. Above ground, the city continued its relentless pace, unaware of the hearts breaking in its midst. In corporate boardrooms and newsrooms, people discussed and dissected her life like it was entertainment. And somewhere in her mansion, Marjorie Harlow was surely savoring her victory, having finally found a way to destroy not just Naomi, but the man who had dared to protect her. The bus station glowed like a lonely lighthouse in the midnight darkness. Naomi stood beneath the fluorescent lights, her small suitcase containing all she had left in the world. The terminal was nearly empty, except for a few weary travelers dozing on hard plastic seats. She approached the ticket counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "One ticket to Millstone Creek, Georgia, please." The elderly clerk peered at her over reading glasses. "That's quite a ways. Last bus heading south tonight." Naomi nodded, sliding exact change across the counter. Her hands trembled as she took the ticket, remembering how her mother used to say that Millstone Creek was where broken hearts went to heal. The Greyhound bus pulled up right at midnight, its engine rumbling in the quiet darkness. Naomi chose a seat near the back, away from the handful of other passengers. As the bus pulled away from New York City, she watched the bright lights fade into darkness, each mile putting more distance between her and the life she was leaving behind. The highway stretched endlessly before them, streetlights giving way to starlight. In the darkness, memories flooded back. Her mother's voice, strong and clear, singing old hymns on their own bus rides to visit family in Millstone Creek. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Naomi whispered, her mother's favorite hymn catching in her throat. She remembered how Miriam Jefferson would sing it during hard times, her faith unwavering even when life was at its darkest. The bus rumbled through the night, passing through sleeping towns and empty highways. Naomi dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every stop, half expecting to see Grant's determined face among the passengers boarding. But he never appeared. Dawn was breaking when they crossed the Georgia state line. The morning sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, reminding Naomi of countless childhood summers spent in Millstone Creek. The small town hadn't changed much since then. Still the same weathered buildings, the same ancient oak trees lining Main Street, the same white-steepled church rising above it all. When the bus finally stopped in Millstone Creek, Naomi stepped out into the humid morning air. The town was just beginning to stir, shopkeepers unlocking doors, early risers heading to Rose's Diner for coffee. She walked slowly down Main Street, her suitcase wheels clicking against the uneven sidewalk. Rose's Diner still had the same neon sign, though it flickered now with age. A room for rent sign hung in the window. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. "Help you, honey." Rose herself stood behind the counter, older now, but with the same kind eyes Naomi remembered from childhood visits. "I saw the room for rent sign," Naomi said softly. Mia Jefferson. The lie felt strange on her tongue, but necessary. She couldn't risk anyone connecting her to the scandals in New York. Rose studied her for a moment. $50 a week, includes utilities. It's small but clean. You working? Looking, Naomi replied. I'm good with people. Used to helping out. Rose nodded thoughtfully. Church food pantries always needed extra hands. Pay ain't much, but it's honest work. Within an hour, Naomi had the key to a tiny room above the diner. The space was sparse, a narrow bed, a dresser with a crack in the mirror, a small bathroom with temperamental plumbing. But it was safe, and it was hers. That afternoon, she walked to the white steepled church. The food pantry operated out of the basement, and the coordinator, Mrs. Baker, welcomed the help without asking too many questions. Soon, Naomi fell into a quiet routine, stocking shelves, packing boxes, offering gentle smiles to those who came seeking help. Meanwhile, in New York, Grant Weston was fighting his own battles. In his penthouse office, he sat surrounded by financial reports and legal documents. The board wanted him to step down temporarily, but he refused to be pushed aside. "Sell my personal shares," he instructed his lawyer, "as much as needed to fund a full investigation. I want every detail about those forged documents exposed." His team worked tirelessly, tracking paper trails and digital footprints. Grant knew that somewhere in the web of lies, Marjorie had left evidence of her deception. He would find it, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks. Naomi's life in Millstone Creek took on a peaceful rhythm. She worked at the food pantry during the day, sometimes helping Rose with the dinner rush in the evenings. Her short hair grew out slowly, and with it, some of her confidence returned. She made herself small and invisible, but found purpose in the work. Each box of food she packed, each kind word she offered, helped heal something inside her. The locals knew her only as Quiet Mia, the new volunteer who worked hard and kept to herself. One evening, as sunset painted the church windows in amber light, Naomi joined the weekly prayer service. Candlelight flickered across faces both familiar and strange as the small congregation gathered. The pastor's words washed over her, speaking of hope and renewal. Holding her candle, Naomi closed her eyes. The flame's warmth reminded her of all she'd lost, her husband, her dreams, Grant's friendship, her very identity. But here, in this moment of quiet worship, she found the courage to pray again. "God," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the air around her candle's flame. "If I've lost everything, let me at least find myself again." The candlelight danced, casting shadows that seemed to move with the rhythm of her mother's old hymns. In this small town where her mother had once found strength, Naomi began the slow work of rebuilding herself, one quiet act of service at a time. The Georgia summer settled into a gentle rhythm for Naomi. Her days at the food pantry expanded into broader church duties, where she found unexpected healing in serving others. Rose's diner became home, its familiar sounds of clinking plates and murmured conversations a comfort in her exile. Sunday mornings now found her in the church basement, surrounded by eager children's faces as she taught Bible stories. Their innocent questions and unguarded smiles helped restore something she thought she'd lost forever. "Miss Mia," little Sarah Matthews asked one Sunday, "why did David believe he could beat Goliath?" Naomi smiled, adjusting her headscarf. "Because he had faith bigger than his fear. Sometimes the smallest person can do the biggest things if they trust God to help them." The words resonated in her own heart, echoing her mother's teachings from long ago. Each lesson she shared seemed to strengthen her own fragile faith, like tiny stones building a foundation. That particular Wednesday afternoon, Naomi wiped down tables at Rose's during the slow period between lunch and dinner. The television mounted, In the corner usually provided background noise, weather reports, local news, the comfortable chatter of small-town life. But today, a familiar face stopped her mid-motion. Grant Weston's image filled the screen. The headline beneath made her heart stop. "Billionaire CEO faces federal fraud investigation." She gripped the edge of the table, her cleaning cloth forgotten. The reporter's voice cut through the diner's quiet. "Sources claim financial irregularities in recent transactions. Though Weston maintains his innocence, the timing coincides with controversy surrounding his relationship with a former employee. Ain't that the fella who's been in all them papers?" Rose asked, refilling a customer's coffee cup. "Looks like them rich folks always got troubles." Naomi could barely breathe. She knew Grant, his integrity, his dedication to honest business. The charges were impossible. Then the camera panned to show Marjorie Harlow leaving a federal building, her practiced smile barely concealing her triumph. "Just providing information to help the investigation," Marjorie told reporters, her voice dripping with false concern. "It pains me to see such a respected figure possibly involved in questionable dealings." The pieces clicked into place. The Harlows weren't content with destroying just Naomi. They wanted to ruin Grant for defending her. Her hands trembled as she excused herself to the bathroom. Locked inside the small space, Naomi pressed her forehead against the cool mirror. "Lord," she whispered, "protect him. He's suffering because he showed kindness to me." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she remembered his quiet strength, his unwavering support during her darkest days. That evening, dark clouds gathered over Millstone Creek. The air grew thick with approaching rain as Naomi helped Pastor Johnson prepare for an evening prayer meeting. They were arranging hymnals when the first drops hit the stained glass windows. "Looks like we're in for a big one," the pastor said, glancing up. "Better check the tarps in the attic. That old roof's been giving us trouble." Thunder rolled across the sky as they climbed to the church attic. Sure enough, water was already seeping through weak spots in the aging roof. They worked quickly, spreading tarps over boxes of Christmas decorations and old Sunday school supplies. "We'd better cover the pews, too," Naomi suggested, remembering how water damage had warped some of the wood last spring. As they draped protective covers over the polished pews, the storm intensified. Rain drummed against the roof, and wind howled through the bell tower. The sound reminded Naomi of another stormy night, years ago, when her mother had taught her a special hymn. Without thinking, she began to hum the melody. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound! The familiar notes filled the empty sanctuary, mixing with the storm's symphony. It was the same song she'd sung at James's funeral, though then it had been choked with grief. Now, somehow, it felt different, like a prayer for healing rather than a cry of loss. Outside the heavy wooden doors, unbeknownst to Naomi, a tall figure stood in the rain. Grant Weston had finally tracked her to Millstone Creek, following whispered hints and half-remembered stories about her mother's hometown. He'd driven through the gathering storm, determined to find her. Now he stood motionless, listening to the haunting melody floating through the church walls. The sound of her voice, so achingly familiar, confirmed what his heart already knew. He'd found her at last. Rain soaked through his expensive suit, but he didn't move. The hymn wrapped around him like a beacon in the darkness, drawing him closer to the doors. Yet he remained outside, letting her voice wash over him, carrying memories of candlelit dinners and quiet conversations, of shared pain and unexpected joy. Inside, Naomi continued to work, unaware of her audience. She moved between the pews, adjusting tarps and humming her mother's song. The storm raged outside, but in this moment she felt a strange peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, for her, for Grant, for all of them, She was no longer running from them. The hymn filled the sanctuary, rising above the thunder, a testament to faith that endured beyond grief, beyond scandal, beyond fear itself. And outside, Grant stood in the rain, listening to the woman who had taught him that true strength often came disguised as gentleness, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply refusing to be broken. Dawn broke over Millstone Creek with a gentle mist rising from the rain-soaked earth. The storm had passed, leaving behind puddles that reflected the pale morning sky. Naomi arrived early at the church, as she had every morning since fleeing to this small town. Her simple cotton dress swished against her legs as she climbed the weathered steps, keys jingling in her hand. She stopped short. There, sitting on the top step, was Grant Weston. His normally impeccable appearance was gone. His expensive suit was wrinkled and dark with moisture, his hair disheveled from the night's rain. He must have stayed there all night, waiting. Despite his bedraggled state, his eyes held the same gentle warmth she remembered. Naomi's heart thundered in her chest. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to run away. Instead, she stood frozen, her fingers clutching her keys so tight they left marks in her palm. "Grant?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" He stood slowly, like a man who had been still too long. "Looking for you," he said simply. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd caught cold from the rain. Naomi took a step backward, shaking her head. "You shouldn't have come. The scandal. Your company. I don't care about any of that." Grant's words were firm but gentle. "We found proof, Naomi. Marjorie fabricated everything." Her legs felt weak. She grabbed the iron railing for support. "What? The inheritance documents, the supposed evidence of fraud, all of it was forged. The FBI is investigating her now." A ghost of a smile crossed his tired face. "She got sloppy, too eager to destroy us both." Naomi sank onto the steps, her mind spinning. "But your company? I saw the news. I sold my shares." He sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "All of them. The board wanted me to deny knowing you, to publicly distance myself. I refused." "You... what?" Naomi stared at him, horror dawning. "Grant, that company was your life's work. Everything you built—" "No." He turned to face her fully. "Everything I built was empty, without purpose, without—" He paused, searching for words. "Without someone to share it with who understood what really matters." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. "I never wanted this. I never wanted you to lose everything because of me. I haven't lost anything that matters." Grant's voice grew stronger. "Money comes and goes, reputation can be rebuilt. But integrity, that's something you can only lose once." The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the church steps. In the distance, early risers were beginning to move through town, heading to work or morning errands. "When you disappeared," Grant continued, "I realized something. I wasn't just worried about you. I was lost without you. These past weeks, watching the Foundation's work crumble, seeing everything we built together fall apart, none of that hurt as much as not knowing if you were safe." A tear slipped down Naomi's cheek. "I thought I was protecting you by leaving. Protecting what you'd built. You taught me that what we build isn't as important as who we become while building it." Grant reached for her hand, then hesitated. "Naomi, I'm not here to rescue you. You don't need rescuing. I'm here because—" He took a deep breath. "Because I want you beside me. Not as a scandal to hide, not as an employee to protect, but as the woman who showed me what real strength looks like." Naomi looked down at his outstretched hand, remembering all the times it had offered support without demanding anything in return. The quiet moments of understanding, the shared pain of loss, the unexpected joy of finding someone who saw past every barrier others had built around her. "You're coming with me," Grant said softly. "If you want to. Not running away this time, but moving forward. Together." The church bell began to toll, marking the hour of noon. Each deep, resonant sound echoed across the quiet town. 12 solemn rings that seemed to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Naomi reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was sure. She didn't speak. No words seemed adequate for this moment. Instead, she held on, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, listening to the last echoes of the bells fade into the noonday air. They sat together on the church steps. They're joined, hands a bridge between past and future, while around them, Millstone Creek went about its quiet business, unaware that on these simple wooden steps, 2 hearts had finally found their way home. The final toll of the bell faded into silence, leaving only the soft sound of their breathing and the distant whisper of wind in the trees. In that moment of perfect stillness, Naomi's grip on Grant's hand tightened slightly. A silent answer to an unspoken question, a promise sealed without words. The flight back to New York felt different this time. Naomi sat beside Grant in first class, watching the clouds drift beneath the wing like scattered cotton. Her hand rested in his, their fingers intertwined with quiet certainty. "Are you ready for this?" Grant asked softly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Naomi took a deep breath. "I think so. It feels right this time, like I'm not running to hide anymore." The media frenzy that greeted them at JFK Airport was intense, but different from before. Gone were the cruel headlines and mockery. Instead, reporters called out questions about her courage, her resilience. News of Marjorie's arrest had broken while they were in the air. "Ms. Jefferson Harlow, how does it feel to be vindicated?" "Mr. Weston, will you be returning to your position as CEO?" Grant's security team created a path through the crowd. Naomi walked with her head high, no longer needing to hide. Her short, natural hair caught the morning light, each curl a testament to growth from trauma. At the foundation office, the staff lined up to welcome her back. Elena, Grant's assistant, had tears in her eyes as she hugged Naomi. "We never believed those lies," she whispered. Never. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal meetings and press conferences. The evidence against the Harlows was damning. Not only had Marjorie forged documents, but investigations revealed years of financial fraud and tax evasion. The family that had once looked down on Naomi now faced public disgrace. Grant's reinstatement as CEO came with unanimous board approval, but during his first meeting back, he surprised everyone with an announcement. "I'm retiring," he said simply, standing at the head of the boardroom table. "Not because of scandal or pressure, but because I've found a greater purpose." The board members exchanged glances. "What purpose?" someone asked. Grant smiled, looking at Naomi, who sat quietly in the corner. "Helping others rebuild their lives. The Foundation's work has shown me what real wealth looks like, and it's not in stock portfolios." Later that evening, in Grant's penthouse, Naomi watched the sunset paint the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Giving up everything you've built?" Grant stood beside her at the window. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm investing in something better." He turned to face her. "Your dream of opening that shelter, let's make it happen. Not just one shelter, but a network of them. Places where women can find not just safety, but dignity." Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes. "My mother would have loved that." The news of Marjorie's conviction came on a Tuesday morning. 5 years for fraud, with additional charges pending. Naomi stood in front of her closet, considering what to wear for her jail visit. Her hand brushed against a familiar fabric, the red dress from the funeral, still hanging there like a memory. She touched it gently, remembering how it had once drawn such scorn. Now it represented something different, the beginning of her journey to freedom. The women's correctional facility was grey and imposing. Naomi walked through security checks and metal detectors, her heels clicking against concrete floors. The visiting room was sparse, metal tables bolted to the floor, uncomfortable chairs, fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh. Marjorie appeared in an orange jumpsuit, her elegant bearing incongruous with the setting. Her carefully maintained appearance had crumbled, no makeup, grey roots showing in her hair. She stopped short when she saw Naomi. "Why are you here?" Marjorie's voice wavered, lacking its usual sharp edge. Naomi sat down at the table. "Because I needed to see you, and because I have something to say." Marjorie sank into the chair across from her, eyes downcast. "If you've come for an apology—" "I haven't," Naomi interrupted gently. "I came to tell you something important." She leaned forward, making sure Marjorie met her gaze. "You tried to cut away my pride, but you only revealed my strength." The words hung in the air between them. Marjorie's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. For once she had no cutting reply, no defensive posture. She simply wept, the ugly, honest crying of someone facing their own darkness for the first time. "I forgive you," Naomi continued softly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your hatred anymore." Marjorie's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Years of carefully constructed superiority crumbled in the face of simple grace. Naomi stood, smoothing her skirt. "I hope you find peace, Marjorie. Real peace, not just the appearance of it." The guard opened the door, and Naomi walked out without looking back. Each step down the corridor felt lighter than the last. She signed out at the front desk, handed in her visitor's badge, and pushed open the heavy main doors. Brilliant sunlight flooded her vision, making her pause on the threshold. After the artificial lighting inside, the natural brightness was almost overwhelming. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth on her face. When she opened them again, she saw Grant waiting by the car. He stood straight and tall, watching her with quiet pride. But she didn't walk to him immediately. Instead, she took a moment to stand in the light, letting it wash over her like a blessing. The sun illuminated everything. The fading spring flowers in the prison's attempt at landscaping, the barbed wire glinting atop the fences, the clouds drifting overhead in an impossibly blue sky. It touched everything equally, turning even this place of confinement into a landscape of possibility. Naomi breathed deeply, feeling truly free for the first time since that day in the Harlow garden. She was no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. She was simply herself, standing in the light, ready to move forward. She took her first step down the prison walkway, then another. Each footfall carried her further from the shadows of her past and closer to the future she could now see clearly. A future built not on revenge or bitterness, but on the power of forgiveness and the strength that comes from rising above hatred. The sunlight followed her, warming her shoulders like a protective embrace as she walked toward Grant and whatever tomorrow might bring. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings as Naomi stood before the renovated Victorian mansion that would become Miriam House. The 3-story building's warm brick exterior gleamed in the morning light, its windows sparkling like new hope. White columns framed the wraparound porch, where dozens of chairs waited for the morning's ceremony. Naomi smoothed her royal blue dress, her mother's favorite color, and touched the small gold cross at her neck. Her natural hair had grown out beautifully since that terrible day, and now formed a crown of tight curls that made her feel both powerful and peaceful. "Everything's ready inside," Grant said softly, appearing beside her. He wore a charcoal suit that matched the serious occasion, but his eyes held their usual warmth when they met hers. "The caterer's just arrived, and Elena's handling the press." Naomi nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I still can't believe this is real." "Believe it." Grant squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be so proud." Cars began arriving, parking along the tree-lined street. Women from the foundation stepped out, faces Naomi recognized from support groups and counseling sessions. Some carried children, others walked alone, but all wore expressions of wonder as they approached the mansion. Sarah, a young mother Naomi had helped escape an abusive marriage, waved from the sidewalk. Her daughter Emma, age 6, clutched a bouquet of yellow daisies. "Miss Naomi!" the little girl called out, running up the path. "These are for you!" Naomi knelt to accept the flowers, hugging Emma tight. "Thank you, sweetheart. They're beautiful." More guests arrived, social workers, donors, community leaders. The porch filled with quiet conversation and occasional laughter. Naomi recognized faces from her darkest days who had become her strongest allies. At 10 o'clock, Grant stepped to the podium they'd set up near the front doors. Sunshine filtered through the oak trees, dappling the gathering with gentle light. "Welcome to Miriam House," he began, his deep voice carrying easily across the crowd. "This place represents more than just shelter. It represents second chances, healing, and the triumph of love over hatred." He paused, looking directly at Naomi. None of this would be possible without one woman's courage to rise above cruelty and transform her pain into purpose. Naomi felt tears threatening as she walked to join him at the podium. Her prepared speech trembled in her hands, but when she looked out at the crowd, she saw only understanding faces. These women knew her story because it echoed their own. "My mother, Miriam Jefferson, taught me that faith isn't just about believing. It's about acting on that belief," she began. "She showed me that true strength comes from helping others stand when they've been knocked down." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "This house is her legacy. Every woman who finds refuge here will carry a piece of her spirit forward." The ribbon cutting itself was simple but powerful. Naomi and Grant held the giant scissors together, their hands overlapping on the handles. The red ribbon fluttered in the breeze as camera flashes captured the moment. When the ribbon fell, applause erupted from the crowd. Tours began immediately afterward. Naomi led groups through the house, showing off the 12 private bedrooms, each decorated in soothing colors and furnished with donations from local businesses. The kitchen gleamed with new appliances, and the living areas featured comfortable couches and children's play corners. "The security system is state-of-the-art," she explained, pointing out the coded entry panels. "And we have staff on site 24 hours a day." In the basement, she proudly displayed the classroom space where women could take GED courses or job training. A computer lab lined one wall, and a small library filled another. "Education is freedom," she said, remembering her mother's words. The top floor housed counseling offices and a meditation room. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, creating patterns of blue and gold on the wooden floor. "This is my favorite space," Naomi admitted to her tour group. "Sometimes you need quiet to hear your own heart again." As afternoon settled in, the crowd thinned. Staff members began preparing the house for its first residents, who would arrive the next day. Naomi found herself in the kitchen, arranging donated coffee mugs in the cabinets. "Hey," Grant's voice came from the doorway. "Come with me for a minute." He led her to the back garden, where stone paths wound between newly planted flower beds. A small fountain burbled peacefully in the center. The setting sun painted everything in soft gold. "I've been waiting for the right moment," Grant said, turning to face her. His expression was tender but serious. "And watching you today, seeing your strength, your grace, your incredible heart, I knew this was it." Naomi's breath caught as he reached into his pocket and lowered himself to one knee. The ring he held caught the fading sunlight, but she barely saw it through her tears. "You once prayed to be seen again," he said softly. "I see you now, not as broken, but whole. Not as a victim, but a victor." His voice roughened with emotion. "You've taught me that real love isn't about rescuing someone. It's about walking beside them while they rescue themselves." Naomi pressed her hands to her mouth, tears flowing freely now. "Naomi Jefferson Harlow, will you marry me?" Grant's eyes shone with unshed tears of his own. "Will you let me walk beside you for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes!" She fell to her knees beside him, not caring about her dress, and threw her arms around his neck. They held each other tight as the garden grew darker around them. Later, they sat on the shelter's wide front steps, watching the sun sink behind the trees. Inside, they could hear the staff preparing for tomorrow, voices calling back and forth, footsteps on wooden floors, occasional laughter echoing through open windows. Naomi leaned her head against Grant's shoulder, her new ring catching the last rays of sunset. "Listen," she said softly. A child's giggle floated out from inside, Emma, who had stayed to help her mother arrange donations. The sound was pure joy, unmarred by fear or shame. "That's what healing sounds like," Naomi murmured. Grant kissed her temple gently. "That's what love sounds like," he corrected. They sat together as twilight deepened, sharing comfortable silence. The porch lights came on automatically, casting a warm glow around them. More laughter drifted out from inside, followed by the sound of someone starting to sing, an old hymn Naomi recognized from her childhood. Her mother had sung that same song years ago, while tending her small garden behind their modest house. The memory didn't bring pain anymore, only gratitude for the legacy of love she'd inherited and could now pass on. The singing inside grew stronger as other voices joined in. Naomi closed her eyes, feeling Grant's steady presence beside her, listening to the harmony of voices rising into the evening air, a chorus of hope, of healing, of home. The spring morning dawned with perfect clarity, washing the garden in soft golden light. Dew sparkled on fresh grass like scattered diamonds, and cherry blossoms drifted on the gentle breeze. At Miriam House, the garden had been transformed into an intimate sanctuary, with white chairs arranged in a semicircle around a simple wooden arch, draped with climbing roses and baby's breath. Women from the foundation helped decorate, their laughter mixing with bird song as they wove flowers through latticework and hung paper lanterns that would glow as evening approached. Many of these women had their own stories of survival, their own scars turned into strength. Today they moved with purpose and joy, celebrating not just a wedding, but a shared journey of healing. Inside, Naomi stood before a full-length mirror in what had once been her office, now temporarily converted into a bridal suite. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, not by outside changes, but by inner light. Her natural hair had grown into a soft crown of curls, each coil catching sunlight through the window. Tiny white flowers were tucked throughout, making her look like a garden come to life. "You look like an angel," whispered Emma, one of the shelter's youngest residents, who had begged to be her flower girl. The child's mother, Sarah, wiped away tears as she adjusted Naomi's simple white dress. Elegant but understated, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that would move beautifully in the spring breeze. Something old, Sarah said, fastening a pearl necklace that had belonged to Naomi's mother around her neck. Something new, added Elena, Grant's former assistant, and now the Foundation's director, holding up a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from Grant. Something borrowed, came from Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor who had become like a grandmother to everyone at Miriam House. She carefully pinned a vintage lace handkerchief to Naomi's bouquet. And something blue, finished Emma, proudly presenting a forget-me-not flower to weave into Naomi's hair. Naomi hugged each woman, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "You are all my something precious," she said softly. Outside, guests began arriving. Foundation members, townspeople who had embraced their work, survivors who had found new beginnings through Miriam House. Grant stood greeting them, handsome in his light grey suit, his face reflecting a joy that made him look younger than he had in years. The ceremony was set to begin at 11 o'clock in the morning, when the sun would be high enough to filter through the cherry blossoms, but not so high as to make the garden too warm. As the time approached, sweet violin music filled the air, played by a young woman who had once sought shelter at Miriam House and now taught music at the local school. Grant took his place under the rose-covered arch, where Reverend Thomas, who had helped Naomi rebuild her faith during her darkest days, waited with a warm smile. The guests settled into their seats, a beautiful mix of faces that represented healing, hope, and second chances. Emma went first, scattering rose petals with careful concentration. Then, as the violin transitioned to a gentle wedding march, Naomi appeared at the garden path's entrance. A collective soft gasp rose from the gathered crowd. She walked alone, not because there was no one to give her away, but because she had chosen to give herself. Each step was deliberate, barefoot on the cool grass, connecting her to the earth and this moment. Her bouquet was a simple arrangement of wildflowers, matching the natural beauty of her crowned curls. Grant's eyes filled with tears as she approached. He had seen her in elegant gowns at galas, in business attire at board meetings, in casual clothes at home, but never had she looked more radiantly herself than in this moment, barefoot in their garden, crowned with flowers and dignity. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Reverend Thomas spoke of love's power to heal, to transform, to make new. Naomi and Grant exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises not just of love, but of partnership, of standing together through whatever storms might come. After they were pronounced husband and wife, Naomi surprised everyone by asking to speak. She turned to face their gathered loved ones, her hand still clasped in Grant's. 6 months ago, I thought my dignity had been cut away, she began, her voice clear and strong. I felt stripped of everything, my pride, my identity, my faith. But standing here today, I understand something profound. Love doesn't own, love rescues, and every scar, even the ones they made us wear, can become our crown. She touched her hair, now grown into its natural beauty. Like these flowers in my hair, we can bloom again after being cut down. We can root ourselves in love and truth and grow toward the light. Tears and smiles met her words. Many of the women present touched their own scars, visible and invisible, understanding deeply what she meant. As if on cue, music began to play. Not a traditional wedding song, but the hymn Naomi's mother used to sing in her garden. Grant led her to the center of the lawn, and they began to dance, still barefoot on the fresh grass. Others joined them, creating a joyful celebration of life and love and second chances. The spring breeze carried cherry blossoms around the dancers like nature's confetti. Laughter mixed with music. Children darted between the adults, and the afternoon light turned everything golden. The paper lanterns swayed gently, waiting for dusk when they would add their own magic to the celebration. From above, the scene was one of perfect harmony. The garden in full bloom, the gathered community moving in circles of joy, the shelter standing as a testament to how pain could be transformed into purpose. And at the center, Naomi and Grant danced, their love story proving that sometimes the deepest wounds can lead to the most beautiful healing. Naomi's voice carried on the breeze, a final testimony to grace. "I thought they cut away my dignity, but God was only pruning me to bloom again." The words floated up towards the spring sky, where clouds drifted like white petals across an endless blue, a healed world stretching out in all directions, full of possibility and promise. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.